Hello, my name is Sarah Hanwhite, and I will be talking about the relationship of our stomachs and our brains and how it affects cognition. More specifically, I will talk about the cognitive effects of IBS, Crohn's disease, and ulcerative colitis. We first need to understand the context of this research in order to fully understand it. It has been known for a while now that our brains and our stomachs have a unique connection. We can gather this from feelings of being hungry or being full and other physiological signs, but this is only the beginning. Aside from the main biological jobs of the stomach, it can also be affected by things like stress, anxiety, or mood. The research I decided to present on goes into depth about these brain-stomach connections specifically related to those with stomach conditions. While there are many, the ones I would like to focus on are IBS and Crohn's disease. Before I dive into the research, I also wanted to mention the enteric nerve system, or the little brain in our bodies. Many people aren't aware of this elaborate system that contains over 100 million nerve cells throughout the intestinal tract. This system is responsible for many actions in our body and is mainly affected by things like nervousness, anxiety, and stress, but also much more. Think about how you feel right before giving a presentation or when you might have a gut feeling about something. These are both times when your enteric nervous system is activated. The two articles I want to focus on are based on the research of Gerald Clark and colleagues, as well as P.J. Kennedy and colleagues. The first study is interested in how Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis affect attention performance. The second study is looking into irritable bowel syndrome and how it can alter cognitive function as a whole. The hypothesis of the first study was that patients with Crohn's or UC would consistently perform worse on attention activities compared to the control condition. In the second study, it was hypothesized that there would be impaired cognitive flexibility and mild visuospatial memory dysfunction in those with IBS. Before we dive into the methods of the study, I want to first give some clarification on what these different conditions are and how they affect someone's everyday life. IBS, to begin with, is a gastrointestinal or GI disorder. This is considered a gut-brain interaction disorder that causes impairment on how the brain and gut work together. Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis are both inflammatory bowel diseases, but Crohn's is autoimmune. Crohn's also affects either the bowel or the intestine. Ulcerative colitis causes inflammation in the digestive tract. All of these conditions cause chronic uncomfort to a patient, which can overall cause a more negative quality of life. Now for how these studies were performed, I will start with the first study, which deals with Crohn's and UC. Clark and colleagues had 15 Crohn's patients, 7 UC patients, and 30 healthy control patients. Each of these patients took part in 2 visits, 6 months apart. During these visits, a neuropsychological test was taken, as well as tests on plasma that are listed on the slide. A cortisol awakening response measurement was used to draw the conclusions of the study. For the second study, the experimenters had 39 IBS patients and 18 Crohn's patients, as well as 34 healthy control patients. During this experiment, a paired associates learning test, an intra-extra dimensional set shift, and spatial working memory, and a computerized Stroop test were all used. The paired associates learning test was also used in the first study. While they were also mentioned on the previous slide, I wanted to point out some of the variables that were used in these experiments. In the first study, the neuropsychological assessment was done as a dependent variable, which found strengths and weaknesses between cognition and the client's medical condition. Other dependent variables are listed here. Some dependent variables for the second study includes a hospital anxiety and a depression self-test, as well as a pain test for those with IBS. The other dependent variables in this study were mentioned on the previous slide, which were the PAL, IED, and SWM, as well as the computerized Stroop test. Some of the independent variables for both studies were age and what condition the patients have. Now it's time to ask what was learned from these studies and was it important? The short answer is yes. In the first study, the researchers found patients with Crohn's experienced impaired attentional performance compared to the control condition. Here are all of the p-values from the study to explore. These graphs demonstrate the additional time needed in the Stroop test for those with Crohn's or UC and the additional errors of Crohn's and UC patients in the PAL test. Study 2 also yielded similar results. This time, IBS patients exhibited a subtle visuospatial memory deficit and a significant association with IBS in visuospatial memory performance. Again, here are the p-values to the more of the dependent variables. This graph shows the significant and non-significant examples of when those with IBS performed worse than the control patients. With both studies demonstrating deficits in the PAL test, this can suggest inter-rater reliability between the two. To understand these results a bit better, I thought I would put them back into simple terms according to the hypotheses. For the first study, evidence was shown that over 6 months, those with Crohn's showed a deficit in attention performance compared to those of UC or healthy individuals. As for the second study, evidence was found supporting the hypothesis that people with IBS do have cognitive deficits subtly with visuospatial episodic memory function. It is always important to recognize where the research may have gone wrong. In these studies, some of the confounds could be low sample sizes and how current the research is as a whole. As of now, there isn't a ton of data about these topics, so it is hard to say if the numbers will hold up over time. Where to next? Both of these studies mention how new the research surrounding the topic is. This means there's so much more work to be done in the future. Hopefully, from what we have gathered about stomach issues in the brain, we can get a solution for the people who suffer with these conditions. The first step has already been done, and now we just need to work on the answer. Thank you.